titled La Mécanique du Cœur, which means the mechanical core.
Heart.
Yes, heart. Which tells a story of a young man who's born with a paralyzed heart, and then his heart is replaced by a mechanical clock type of thing that needs to be wound every day, and that forces him to avoid all emotions and all passions. There's a connection to Margarita's book in the fact that Margarita's book also speaks of the absence of the heart and the mechanization of the heart function. Margarita's writing, however, and there's a mention of Margarita's fiction work in her previous two books, has always moved in spaces that there are spaces in between. And they do this with precision and without drama. They just explore these border spaces. In her writing, to seek oneself is an everyday gesture. The everyday gesture that drives the meaning. Here in this book, however, in Thin Heart, that borderline, that border territory, which it also, for one thing, expands into the issue of language itself, because it's a bilingual book, also is located in the border between life and death. Despite its lack of drama, that's where the meaning of the book resides. Margarita's literature is written to carry forth with that which has been interrupted, and to show rather to monumentalize rather than to dramatize that fracture. This presents a question about the representation of illness, which is a blank screen upon which fears are normally projected. And there's a reference to Susan Sontag's idea that modern medicine, with its microscopic point of view, makes it possible for the militarized metaphor of illness to be the common metaphor of illness that we have in our language. And there's a political sense to that also. In Margarita's case, however, there is no denunciation, there is no finger pointing, there's no identification of the guilty parties in the process, which actually brings up a question about how to speak in contemporary literature about illness. How should illness be represented or spoken about? And then we go back to the book, where the story evolves, and Jack, the main character, has been kept protected until the age of 10, at which point he goes out in the streets and he falls in love with a street singer, and his heart is for the first time exposed to that which it should not have been exposed, which is passion and emotion, and which ends with his fragile mechanical heart. The operation in Margarita's book, however, is contrary to that. It's the opposite. In Margarita's case, passion and emotion are actually life givers. They do not end the story, but bring it back. This is a gesture of thankfulness, which is not an easy thing to achieve without drama or trite language, but it is what it is, and it is appreciated as such.
And now we have the poet and my companion in poetry, Laura Ring. We have been sharing our poems for the last year and a half or so, and it's been a great process.
Thank you. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much, Margarita, for having me. It's such an honor to introduce this stunning book, Corazón de hojalata, Tin Heart, in this collection of poems by turns devastating and delicate, subtle and unnerving. Margarita has given us an intimate chronicle of her experience with a heart that failed, and a profound meditation on what it means to both have a body and be a body, to confront the simultaneity, the limits, the possibilities of the metaphorical and the material. With quiet grace and a beautiful precision of language, Margarita unsettles our understanding of self and the boundaries of the moral community, until we are left wondering where, indeed, one's singular heart might fit in an imaginative universe of care and suffering. I want to begin by talking about Margarita's opening poem, The Heart of Poetry, that starts with a provocation. The heart of poetry, my own included, is almost never the heart, the true one, the organ that moves blood. And indeed, how can one reconcile this poetic heart, this folk cultural symbol, the metaphorical seat of love, emotion, morality, identity, with this mass of corded muscle and tissue? Anthropologists like to say that the body is good to think with, that it is the source of some of our most profound and profoundly cultural notions of order and disorder, self and other. As a symbol, we could say that the heart is overdetermined, just as the material heart has to labor without cease across our entire lives. So the heart as symbol, as metaphor, has to bear an excess of meaning. We make it hold impossible things, things we can't name, our deepest fears and longings on the one hand, and our most casual social shorthand on the other, that ubiquitous red cartoon icon. Margarita's poems powerfully wrestle with and dramatize this quality of excess, of multiplicity. We see it in the multiple hearts that appear in the poem titles: tin heart, hypothetical heart, available heart, where heart becomes a refrain, and in references to familiar metaphors made suddenly strange as they are made to do the work of describing the clinical body, as in her poem, The Failing Heart. Quote, nobody knows what broke my heart. And, quote, when your heart breaks, you might hear a rumor of rising foam ascending up your chest. And, quote, I am still here, fighting heartache away. Reading Margarita's poems, we are reminded that while we have bodies that are good to think with, we also are bodies, that the body is our medium for having a world, as the philosopher Merleau-Ponty would say. What a privilege it is to be able to forget that. In the poem In Favor of Oblivion, forgetting is a kind of mercy, a respite from the body in struggle. But her poem Tin Heart revolves around a body that will not be forgotten. The background heartbeat, the unremarked soundtrack of our lives, replaced by an uncanny hum, reminiscent of a refrigerator. It is what happens when an autonomous function, the beating of a heart, the drawing of breath, rises to consciousness because of crisis. And Margarita does not simply describe her experience, she takes us with her. I am so struck by the poem Hypothetical Heart, where the poetic form, the brilliant use of line breaks, forces the reader to rehearse the rhythms of an increasingly distressed body. So the increasingly clipped or enjambed lines reflecting a worsening shortness of breath until that final devastating section, which I will read, but I'm going to exaggerate the pauses here just to give you a sense of how it appears on the page. Quote, and I wonder how weak would my weak heart have to be for me to wish a new heart in exchange for someone else's life. Reading it, we are left breathless. When your heart has failed, or is also a machine, or is not made of who you are, how, Margarita asks, are you to understand these familiar endearments, like mi corazón, these metaphors, the heart as icon? Throughout the collection, the poet appears as a traveler who has been made to step outside of her own body and must come to it again as if to a foreign country. This mirrors the story she so beautifully narrates in her introduction of her journey from Spanish to English and her continued weaving between them. This, too, is a new language of hearts, a disenchanted one, perhaps, of systoles and diastoles. And here I'm struck by the image of the ballerina in her poem. A recital is called Heartbeat. What do we do with a material heart that is not docile in the face of language, that resists, that imposes limits, even as it animates us, dancer and spectator alike? Even as Margarita's poems challenge our understanding of the metaphorical and the material, they also unsettle the boundaries between self and other, between commonality and individuality. There is something both fundamentally shared and yet irreducibly individual about illness, mortality, survival, and death. Excuse me. But what is striking about Margarita's poetry is how radically expansive her universe of care could be said to be. How generously the boundaries are drawn around what and who has value, who matters. Her poem, I Am a Survivor, is a refusal of a narrative of heroism, but even more so of individual or human exceptionalism. Quote, I just cling to life, like any other organism, a lynx, a leaf. Her poem, Those Things, Esas Cosas, is a delicate reflection on how the experience of suffering or sorrow can isolate us from the human community. But it also performs a kind of retrospective empathy toward those we failed to understand, back when bad things only happened to others. And it seems to me a kind of forgiveness toward those who similarly cannot understand what is happening to us. But the self and individual experience return in the most beautiful ways. In her poem, A Long, Long Time, with the consoling of daughters, and in The Battle, where, quote, if I am dust, I once was dust in love, and in Valentine, that soulful tribute to this other self, with this other heart, that she now carries, that carries her. Corazón de hojalata, Tin Heart, is a beautiful, rich, and nuanced collection, and I'm so grateful to have had this opportunity to talk to you about it. These are poems that will stay with me for a long, long time.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to read a couple of the poems. I think I'm going to stand up because so I can see you. I want to thank City Lit Books and Teresa for hosting us in her beautiful bookstore. I want to thank Capra and Miguel Lopez Lemus, who gave a house to my poems in this beautiful book. I'm so happy to have published with Pandora López de Pario. And I want to thank also my translator, who is not in Chicago. And so I explained this in the introduction to the book. Some of the poems I wrote first in Spanish, and then I translated them to English myself. Some others came to me in English, and I wrote them in English and was able to translate them myself to Spanish. And some of them I wrote in one language, and I didn't find a way to translate them myself. And Marco Dorsman, who is an amazing translator, did that for me in a few of them, because I his credit in those poems. So I'm going to read a couple of poems. I'm going to read them first in Spanish and then in English. Corazón hipotético. ¿Y si este corazón no diera para más que el agitado aliento de doblar la esquina? Si diera solamente para una vida de muchos límites y de modesto alcance, ¿no sería esa todavía una vida? ¿O sería apenas una vida a medias? Habría que decirle entonces a mi corazón que desafortunadamente ha fallado. ¿Será que no ha amado lo suficiente? ¿O será que siempre quiso amar de más? ¿O que se trababa amando algo que estaba siempre más allá de lo evidente? Dicen que su ventrículo izquierdo bombea apenas y que su miocardio es menos músculo que dura cicatriz. Pero mi corazón siente, se agita, mueve la sangre que me anima, y yo, la que este fallido corazón alienta, camino, escribo, leo, cocino, juego y quiero. No sé, es cierto, si sería capaz de escalar montañas y si podría defenderme de los oscuros embates del destino. Pero este corazón marcha y yo sigo. Y si determinaran que este corazón no es ya un suficientemente bueno corazón, Dicen, habría que ordenar otro corazón a la medida. El problema es que ese otro corazón anima ahora otra vida, una vida supuestamente plena, la de alguien que tal vez podría escalar montañas y enfrentar cualquier cosa que el destino deparara. Pero para que ese corazón reemplazara mi fallido corazón, esa vida, supuestamente plena, tendría que dejar de ser, para que su corazón pasara a animar la mía. Y sé que no se trataría de un sacrificio fríamente calculado, de algo planeado por conciencia alguna, que sería el corazón venido de una vida accidentalmente cegada. Y aún así, resulta extraño concebir la hipotética circunstancia. Y me pregunto cuán fallido tendría que estar mi fallido corazón para que yo pudiera desear uno nuevo a cambio de otra vida. So this poem I wrote at the end of 2015 after I had my first surgery, the valve replacement, and I was informed that that had not been enough and that my heart was in truly bad shape, and they for the first time mentioned the idea of a transplant, and that just seemed so incredibly foreign to me that I didn't know how to even think about it, and that's when I started thinking of this hypothetical circumstance that ended up being just a fact. Hypothetical heart. And if this heart could not handle more than my panting every time I turned the corner, if it could only afford me a life full of limits and very modest goals, would that not be still alive? Or would it only be half alive, barely alive? Would I need to tell my heart that, sadly, it has failed? Is it that it did not love enough? Or perhaps that it always wanted to love too much? Or that it tripped itself by loving something that was not there to be loved? They say that its left ventricle barely pumps, and that its myocardium is less strong muscle than a bunch of scars. But nonetheless, my heart feels, flutters, moves the blood that gives me life. And I, the one whom this heart heartens, I walk, write, read, cook, play, and love. I don't know for sure if it will be able to climb mountains, or if I could face the dark assaults of fate. But my heart goes on, and so do I. And if they determine that this heart is not a good enough heart anymore, they say it will be necessary to order a new heart, ready to go. The thing is that that other heart pumps another life now, a life I presume full and rich, the life of someone who can climb mountains and face anything that fate brings. But for that heart to replace my failing heart, that life, that supposedly full life, would have to stop, so its heart would start animating mine. And I know this would not be a cold, calculated sacrifice, something planned in full awareness. This would be a heart whose life was accidentally ripped. And nonetheless, it is weird to think of the hypothetical circumstance, and I wonder how weak would my weak heart have to be for me to wish a new heart in exchange for someone else's life. This one is called In Favor of Oblivion. I'm going to again read the Spanish version first. Una apología del olvido. Nunca pensé que defendería el olvido. Yo, que me imaginé detective secular de un pasado inabarcable, escudriñando en los recuerdos con el afán de los conversos, segura, convencida de que contendrían la verdad, la revelación, la clave. Yo, adalid de la memoria, negándome a aceptar la muerte de los muertos y denunciando a los que buscan borronear las oscuras cicatrices de la historia. Yo, ahora, ante las presentes condiciones, me rindo ante el olvido. Cuando el recuerdo es incapaz de enseñar nada, cuando la memoria no puede conducir a la justicia, porque no hay nada que juzgar, porque no hay más culpable que el azar tan desalmado, cuando el ataque es brutal, pero sin causa y sin agente, el olvido se presenta como bálsamo y resguardo. Nunca pensé que defendería el olvido, y sin embargo, agradezco esta niebla en la conciencia que difumina los dolorosos orígenes de mis cicatrices. In Favor of Oblivion. And this is one of the translations by Marco Dorsman. I never thought I would defend forgetting. I, who imagined myself a secular detective of a limitless past, scrutinizing memories with the devotion of a convert, certain, convinced that they contain the truth, the revelation, the key. I, the champion of memory, refusing to accept the death of the dead and denouncing those who seek to erase the dark scars of history. I, now, and under current circumstances, surrender myself to oblivion. When memory is no longer able to teach anything, when memory is unable to lead to justice because there is nothing to judge, because there is no guilty party, because chance, heartless chance, when the attack is ruthless but without cause or agent, oblivion is there to provide shelter and care. I never thought I would defend forgetting, and yet, nonetheless, I am thankful for this fog in my awareness as it blurs the painful origins of my scars. I don't want to bore you guys.
No, absolutely.
You go in and
Okay.
try.
Kintsugi, it's dedicated to my fellow karateka Michelle Curley, who mentioned this to me in passing once about this Japanese pottery technique that fills the cracks in pottery, we call it. And this time Marco translated from my original English into Spanish. So this is another translation by Marco Dorsman. ¿Cómo remendar lo que se ha roto? ¿Cómo esconder las cicatrices y surcidos? ¿Cómo volver a hacerlo entero? No se puede, ¿ves? Ocultar las grietas de la vida vivida solo produce una máscara dura y falsa, sin resplandor, ni brillo, ni calor. El material del que estamos hechos refleja el deterioro y el desgaste de los días, felices o tristes.